Welcome back to the Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast, where we will explore the local arts, culture, and community in the Lehigh Valley. We'll be doing this through conversations with individual artists, administrators, and organizations. We'll discuss all types of mediums with the goal of enriching local arts culture.
Welcome back to Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast. I'm Elise, and today I am joined by special co-host and former podcast guest, Nina Boodhansingh.
Hi.
Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm so excited to have you host with me today.
Thanks for asking me to host. I was very excited by it.
How does it feel to be back in the studio?
Awesome. It's always so much fun here. There's always lots of laughing and giggling.
Yeah, there's always a lot that is said pre the recording button being hit, or maybe the recording button does get hit and then Ben just cuts it out. But
probably.
There's a lot that gets said that leads to a lot of giggling. But yes. But yeah, I'm very glad that you're back here with us. If you haven't listened to it yet, Nina was on episode 2 of season 1 of Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast. So I highly recommend going and listening to it. It was a great episode. But we are so glad to have you back hosting with us today. And I'd love to hear what you're working on.
So recently, I just completed a mural at the Tavern on Liberty Street, also known as Liberty Street Tavern. So they are located on 23rd and Liberty in Allentown. They're actually across the street from Muhlenberg College and diagonal from Jay's Local. So if you can get out there, it's a really awesome, brightly colored mural. I added lots of layers, geometric forms, and then there's Lady Liberty, and she's holding a beer glass. It's actually a dainty little goblet that she's like holding up in her hand, and it is glowing. You know, there's like sun rays from behind, so I call it Lady Liberty and the Holy Beer.
I was going to say, it's very, very like Monty Python and the Holy Grail-esque.
Yes. With like abstract qualities, yeah. Yep. But that's been my most exciting adventure of recent. And then I'm also working on getting some smaller items together for the holidays. Last year I did little wooden ornaments, and this year I'm doing the same thing. They're going to be little wooden ornaments with my paintings on, but some of them I'm actually going to do mixed media because this past year I've been really inspired by multiple collage artists. So I get some like really cool paper from Dick Blick.
Oh, nice. And
also like I'll get old magazines and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm going to try to get the collage work onto these ornaments to give a little something different to everybody. And the other thing you can look forward to is the Baum School of Art. The Holiday Gift Gallery is coming up, and yes. I do have some smaller pieces, some paintings, and also some jewelry that I worked on. So take a look out for that. And then
that's awesome.
Thank you. And then earlier this morning, you and I set up the show in the Steel Pixel Studios Art Gallery.
Yes.
So I have several pieces in there, which look really awesome on those walls, if I might add.
They really do. I'm very excited.
I'm really excited the way it turned out, and I just wanted to mention 2 of the pieces are from a live painting experience that I did at the Ice House tonight in Bethlehem. One was from 2018. It was the first Experimento #1. It was called The Cultural Stew. So I have a piece from that performance. And then just a couple weeks ago, I performed again with Experimento at the Ice House, and it was their 4th live performance. And I did another painting. So it's Cities of Gold is from 2018. Mm-hmm. And then You Are Not Lost is from this year, 2021. So those are Wonderful. On display, and they will eventually also be on show on my website.
Very good. Okay. Well, stick around till the end of the episode to hear our opportunity of the week, which will be the opening reception for Nina's show here at Steel Pixel Studios. But we are so grateful to have Andi Grunberg in the studio with us today. Nina invited her, which I super appreciate. So Nina, I'm going to go ahead and ask if you wouldn't mind reading her bio.
Andi Grunberg is a sculptor and mixed media artist living and working in the Lehigh Valley. She was born and raised in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Art has been a large part of her life since childhood. Learning about and creating art has always been integral to her daily life. Andi holds a master's degree in psychology as well as 2 bachelor degrees, one in psychology and one in art with a focus on metalsmithing. At the intersection of art and psychology is the self. Art creates the path towards deep introspection of our lives, the world, and the spirituality and power of women. In celebration of this, her work focuses on the expression of the divine feminine. Using a variety of mediums, Andi is committed to unearthing and expressing the goddess within through the language of art. Her art studio, Expression Studio, is located in the heart of Center City, Allentown.
Andi, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited that you're here. I've seen your work before through the gram or whatever, but I'm very excited to meet you in person and to see some of your work in person. This is really awesome. And Nina, thank you so much for co-hosting today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you back in the studio with us. And
I'm very excited to be here.
thank you so much for inviting Andi to come on the show too.
Of course.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you for saying yes.
This is good studio energy. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'll start off by asking, Nina, you invited Andi on the show. How did you guys meet?
So we were actually talking about this earlier because we were trying to figure out how we actually met. And I partially feel like it could have been through Arthur at the cigar factory, or it was through Anna Hamilton. I don't know, because I worked with Anna a lot doing shows at the Dime downtown. Downtown Allentown. And I don't know, I just remember it frustrates me that I can't remember when we first met. But I just remember being so impressed by you, and your personality was just so bubbly, and I was like, we're gonna get along great.
Thank you. That's so
and
nice.
your work is just gorgeous. So I was
Thank you.
But so I'm not exactly sure.
That's okay.
Maybe it's best if we don't recall.
Yeah.
It was like ships passing in the night.
It's been ages.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you said this morning 8 or 10 years or something.
Well, I feel like maybe 6 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that you had that connection, because now
Yeah,
we get
me
to talk
too.
about Andi's art, which is
Yay.
awesome. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in. How did you get started making art?
So it was always a part of my life. My family always had art. We always looked at art. We always made art a part of, when we went on vacations or went places, went to museums. That was what we did at the kitchen table. We did projects. We had art birthday parties. So it was a really important part of growing up. So it was never I started art when I was this age. It just was always there for me.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Do you feel is there a specific type of art or style of art that you were really attached to as a kid that kind of fed into what you make today?
I don't think so. I think even if you look at things that I've saved, it's just a very eclectic mix of anything and everything, whether it's a picture someone took of garbage or a Renaissance painting. If it strikes me and I like it, that's what I respond to. So it doesn't really matter for me. If I respond to it, it doesn't matter what medium, who the artist is, how it was made. So
I have a question for you. So looking back at your childhood, was there any art material in particular that you really loved working with?
I don't think there was anything in particular, which I know is the boring answer.
Not necessarily.
If what I tend to do is I tend to find a medium that I respond to at a time and then doggedly pursue it and then figure out how to do it and then move on to the next one. I would say that's probably the most definitive part of art through childhood. So it's like, oh, let's learn crocheting, let's learn painting, let's learn, making candles, like anything crafty, artsy, fine artist, just pursue that material for a length of time and then go on to the next thing.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked was because in elementary school, so I went to a private school and they didn't, you had your art class, but we weren't very art focused. And our art teacher was very mean.
You can say it. It's okay.
And I just, I like asking people this question because I feel like I had a very different experience as an art kid in school growing up versus maybe somebody else that had more access to it. But she had specific cardboard boxes under the art tables that you were only allowed to touch for certain projects and certain times of year. And one time she caught me in the forbidden box, and it was all of the super fancy ribbon, the metallic stuff, the foil paper, the sequins, the glitter. And I always wanted to use that stuff because that's what I used at home. And I wasn't allowed to use it in school. I feel like I was scarred.
I think there's a lot of trauma surrounding, formal art schooling and how people view art as an adult. And I talk about that a lot because I use art I'm a counselor, a grief counselor, and I like to use art when possible to do my counseling because I think that humans don't always have the right words to express these emotions inside. So art can really help you do that. But there's a lot of adults with art fear because they weren't allowed in the metallic glitter sparkle amazing box, or the teacher told them their piece is ugly. And I do think that there is a place for art for every person. And I think it's more about learning how to complete a task, learning how to finish it neatly, learning the technique rather than coming out with this amazing piece. We're not all going to be good at everything, Same with, math or science. We're not all great at that, but we can learn the important base techniques in order to bring that skill with us.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that adult fear of art or trauma surrounding making art. Because I work on a college campus and it's not necessarily a space that's focused directly on people that are already artists. It's more of getting students to kind of embrace art and use that in all realms of their education. And one of the things that comes up all the time is we're giving out these free kits with sketchbook materials, and people will always be I'm not an artist. I can't take that. And I'm no, that's kind of the the point. And it's amazing some of the stuff that people will say to me oh yeah, I don't really make art because I had a teacher in elementary school that yelled at me and told me my art was bad. Or I failed an art project in high school and it kind of ruined it for me. And it's amazing how that simple instantaneous moment can just say telling someone that their art isn't good creates a lifelong fear of it. It's kind of, it's horrible.
It's terrible. Because there's so many other applications for art. I mean, the billboards, the way houses are designed, there's art and creativity in everything. So we're stopping all these people who maybe had other skills through, childhood art trauma or art fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feared watercolor for a long time.
Watercolor is
scary. I still do to an extent, but I enjoy it now. Where in college, it was not my friend. And my professor let me know it was not my cup of tea. And I think a lot of art students experienced that, where it's just like, well, they said this, so I'm just not going to do it, or I can't do it. But that's one person telling you one thing, and you just have to keep at it.
We had something that came up in an episode a couple weeks ago talking about someone's like moment of consciousness. And it was actually a trend that I saw on TikTok where people were talking about like their moment of consciousness and where in their life they like became aware and it's like a first memory kind of thing. But the way it got twisted in this episode was talking about your like art moment of consciousness, and someone was like, oh, I got asked to like help with the mural in our elementary school cafeteria or something, or oh, I got asked to submit for this like workbook or something, and my art was in a book that got sent home to my parents, that kind of thing. So I'm curious if either of you have that kind of like moment in your brain.
Yeah, Andi, I'll let you go first.
So obviously, I'm really bad with dates and times, as we can tell by the story with Nina and I meeting. So the thing that was really powerful for me was seeing the Venus of Willendorf. And now some people are calling her the goddess of Willendorf. But to see a larger woman, and you can tell when you look at her really closely, like how important she was to somebody and how she was this powerful figure, and even how in modern times, how we respond to her. I just remember feeling, like this is a little naughty. This is a little out of the norm. You're so used to seeing advertisements and, with a certain body type and a certain shape and a certain expectation for beauty. And here is this gorgeous, Paleolithic figure that is just gorgeous and stunning. And I think that is, when did that happen? I don't know. But I still remember that feeling of first seeing her and how important that was to me as an artist.
So for me, it was actually within the last few years, I think. Just because, I've been working and working with my art. Well, I graduated 2010 from Kutztown. And after I graduated, I felt kind of defeated. And I stopped painting. I had a residency for a short time at the university, and then I stopped painting for almost a year or so. And I actually remember at one point, I can't believe I actually did this, but at one point I was working for a podiatrist, and I found a letter that I wrote to my extended family, and I told them that I didn't think art was for me, and I think I was meant for the medical field, and I'm going to continue with the podiatrist for a while. Well, that lasted a whole year, maybe. And I really don't like feet, so I don't know where that even came from. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be a medical assistant. I was good at what I did, but, anyway.
Podiatry is hardcore.
Yeah, it really is.
That is a serious commitment.
It is. It was. But, then slowly I got back into my art, and then still kind of felt that, like that imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of people feel no matter what their passion, whatever their career path is. And I'm like, I'm really not. This isn't, like, I just do this for fun. Like, yeah, I make money here and there, but whatever. Other people are so much better. Then Well Crafted Beer Company came to me and asked me to do designs for their beer can labels, and I was like, I think I made it. Like, even though I had done shows and other things like years before that, it really wasn't until then when I was just like, okay, I am doing this. Like, not I can do this, I am doing this. And that made me realize, like, yeah, just keep going, keep doing it. And I say that a lot, but really just keep going.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the story of probably most artists, this like cycle of I'm shitty, I'm okay, I'm amazing, I'm shitty, I'm okay. And then add in like, I'm doing well. No, I'm not doing well. It's just, I'm never going to do art again, and I'm going to do art all the time. It's just such a cycle. And I also think that our society contributes to that because they don't value art and what we do. I mean, some countries, you know, if you're an artist, you get paid, you get grants, you get housing, you get, you know, your art is up in the street. And here it's like every artist probably has a day job. Every artist probably has another source of income. It's really hard. It's a struggle.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's why I personally felt that struggle for so long, because it was like, well, if I'm an artist, I shouldn't have to work this day job. It's like, well, here you do. Like, wake up.
It's difficult because I think that there comes with that such an identity crisis, or like I feel that very much, like that divide between artist and like having the day job kind of thing. And now I feel lucky that there's like a lot of overlap in that, but I think that like at what point do you kind of say like, okay, I have this day job, this is what I do, but I identify as an artist? Like, where does that distinction kind of come in for you?
Actually, I think it came from another experienced artist, and I was going with a friend to an art show where I had a piece, and I was freaking out, and he was like, "You're an artist, act like one." And I was like, whoa, okay. So I think even if I don't always feel, you know, have the feeling of like, I'm an artist and I'm amazing, which I, you know, is a good feeling to have. I try to think like, I'm an artist, I need to act like one. So I try to keep that in mind. It's not always, you know, successful, but.
Yeah, I was always told that when I'm introduced to somebody, or I introduce myself to someone and they ask, well, what do you do? Say first that you're an artist, and then say, oh, I also work in healthcare, or I work in the industry, like the bar industry, the service industry. You know, always put the artist in you first. Yes.
That has helped too. And people will look at you weird and say, but do you have another job?
That is my job.
How dare you?
It's fulfilling.
Yeah, not everyone can say that about their day job. So, so speaking of day jobs, you mentioned briefly that you are a counselor as well.
Yes.
And that you incorporate art and art practice into your work.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
I work for a hospice, a local hospice, and I'm a grief counselor. So sometimes we work with children. Children don't always have the vocabulary, and to be honest, most adults don't have the vocabulary either for their emotional state, especially while grieving. So, you know, where I can, I try to fit in, you know, art projects like let's make a painting for grandma. How does she make you feel? Let's, you know, things that are it's a specific example, and then their mind can go anywhere with it with the art supplies that I provide.
So I'm curious because, and this is both for my benefit and listeners' benefits, but what's the like specific distinction between someone that says they're like an art therapist versus a counselor versus a psychologist?
Art therapy is they have their own certification and licensure. So, and a psychologist or psychiatrist, that's also schooling and licensure and, you know, the years they've practiced.
So I wanted to jump back to something you said earlier about your art consciousness and the Venus of Willendorf, because I was really excited when you brought that up and when I got to look at your artwork, because that's actually one of my like uber favorite pieces of art ever. I want to give a shout out to my art history professor, Dr. Flaherty, who's an amazing art history professor over at Penn State Lehigh Valley. But she gave a lot of emphasis to this piece, and it was one of, I think, her favorite pieces. And it was something that I really connected with, and I'm glad to hear that that was something you connected with too.
Yeah, and I think about cave people and I'm sure that there is a more historically accurate term, but cave people and what they had to do to survive, hunting and gathering and fishing and, starting fires and making fires. And still they took time to do art. They took time to and I'm sure even at that time it wasn't such a light, like, oh, we're doing an art project. Like, I think it was something that they specifically took time out of their day to do. And I think it shows how important, people's expression of their internal world or their life or what they see every day, and how important that is. Because, I have carved stone and I've carved soft, like soapstone, and it is very tedious and long and dirty. So they're carving these stones and these sculptures and these pieces. I mean, to me, it shows how important, or carving, on a cave wall, or in painting and, creating shapes. And I mean, to me, that just shows how important art is for human beings. No matter where we are or what we're doing, it's so important to take time to be creative, to do art. Even if it's not good art, it's okay. A lot of artists have bad art, and we can probably admit that. So it's normal. It's okay. Yes. Not every piece is a success. I know I have to I'm really talking to myself. I'm not talking to anyone else.
No,
only for me, Andi. It's okay. It's okay if you mess up. It's okay if your piece isn't good. Just keep going.
I want to clip that little bit and just play it on loop. That's my alarm clock every morning. It's okay if it's not good. It's okay. Just keep going.
It's an experiment. I had a teacher who used to say that it's an experiment, and it's really hard because also I think there's a level of perfectionism in many, many artists. It's hard. It's disappointing. It's sad. But I learned, so I have a studio with two studio mates, Anna Hamilton and Femi Johnson, and they taught me so many things, watching other artists work. And, you can paint over it. You can throw it away. You can smash it. It's okay. It doesn't have to be. You can work on it, put it aside, and come back to it even years later. There are pieces that I've worked on for years. And it's okay. We're just all a mess.
Yes.
Well, I actually have two things to say. First, when you were talking about self-expression and how important it is, it reminded me of several years ago, one of my brothers was talking to me about, how we don't take the time or appreciate things such as art and music and dancing as much as we should. And what made him say that was he saw somebody just dancing down, listening to music and dancing down the street. And there are so many times where I'm walking down the street and I feel like also dancing, but I don't, because I'm like, hey, someone's going to look at me and be like, that's a crazy person right there. But at the same time, it's that's how we express ourselves. And it's so important. Just go with it. Yeah. Who cares if you're singing down the street while you're walking, or you're dancing to the music, and just create, express yourself. So next time you see me, I'll be dancing down the street.
Do it. Just do it. Experiment.
Yes. There's such an important part of art and music and expression is that mindfulness aspect to it, and just taking the time to really focus on why it's important or why it has meaning, or what the emotions are that kind of come out of it for you. And that's funny because I think if I listen to music, it's always in the car on the way to work, or while I'm working on something, or while I'm typing something out. And I notice I play the violin, and when I am practicing music, there's so much more mindfulness associated with it because I have to focus on what I'm practicing. And I think it's the same for visual art too, where you can look at something in passing. You can look at a beautiful architectural building. You can look at a mural. You can look at a painting in passing and kind of just be like, oh, yeah, that's great. Or you can really take the time to look at something. And that definitely connects back to what you were saying about cave people creating artwork, because that would take so much time out of your day when the focus of your whole life was surviving and just day-to-day tasks, hunting, gathering, maintaining your shelter kind of thing. But like how mindful you'd have to be to make art a part of your day. And that's just amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, even Neanderthals, they found a really beautiful grave site, and I'm pretty sure it was a woman, but she was buried like a full burial. She had jewelry on, and that's like, carved stone jewelry, so they even had rituals back then. It's a part of us to celebrate life, to decorate the body, to show the body in different ways and forms. It's a part of us. And I think, I hope we get back to it. And I think that, the isolation due to COVID has really helped reconnect people to art and creativity and the importance of it. Because when you're sitting at home for months on end and you can't go anywhere, what are you doing? Leisure is a part and should be a part of our lives. It's an important part. And I think we've lost some of that as technology has increased.
Absolutely. I just learned about something recently called spaghetti lines. And I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. But I don't even know where I saw it. I'm sure it was on TikTok or Instagram. You can't see how hard I'm rolling my eyes at myself right now. But it's ruining my life. But it was talking about how there were these cave paintings that when they were found, they had like what people thought were like scratch marks or just deterioration from how old they were. They're like Paleolithic era cave paintings. And talking about how they weren't really sure what it was until there was a gentleman that went into the cave with a lantern and saw that the movement of the fire and that the way the lines were left between like figures in the painting made it look like they were moving.
Yes.
And that is such a hyper conscious thing to like, okay, we like how this cave painting looks great. Very still. We need to do something to kind of like amp up our space. And I think that's so cool. Like I don't know why I connect with that so much, but it's something that's just so like they were staring at this wall for hours and hours and thinking, how can we improve upon this? Just like artists do now, And I just love it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Maybe it's not called spaghetti lines. Maybe I'm just like totally pulling that out of nowhere.
If it's not, it should be.
Yeah, it should be. Ugh, I need like a academic resource for my information and not just like social media.
Historians are going to start leaving comments on this podcast.
Do it, I dare you.
I'm sorry.
It's not spaghetti lines, it's linguine lines.
Oh God, sorry. Linguine. It's tortellini lines. I don't know. Oh gosh.
I do have another question, and again, it's kind of going back to what we were talking about before about telling yourself that it's okay to have a bad piece of work or paint over something or throw it out, destroy it. I've had a few artists tell me to never paint over anything and never throw anything out and to keep it all. I have painted over multiple paintings and I have thrown many things out. How do you handle, like, if you say, like, have you ever painted over a piece that you didn't like?
That's a good question. I think that there are really bad pieces that aren't going anywhere, and then there are just horrible experimental mistakes. Mm-hmm. So if it's something, I try to get a consensus. I'm a little bit lucky in that I have two other people who are artists who understand my work, who I can ask. So I think that is a huge asset. So, I mean, there have been pieces where I'm like, this is terrible and shitty. And then I'll come in and they'll have been, my studio mates or someone who came and visited and told my studio mates how great this piece was, and I'm not seeing it. So I think it is important to make sure you're not just willy-nilly destroying everything, although there is a piece in that. There's a satisfaction of doing that, like being able to let go of something that you don't like. But it's definitely, I definitely, for me, take a consensus because you can't always see the goodness in your work. Especially, I mean, and I think that as an artist, when you're looking at your own work, we're just so judgmental already. So we're not even coming from a place of purity. Like, we're already tainted by our own thoughts and feelings about ourselves. So that other voice, other people, contributing, I think is important. But, ultimately we are the judge, jury, and executioner. So, ultimately it is up to us.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I've had pieces where it's like I feel stuck, and then somebody comes in and looks at it and they're like, "Oh, I'll buy this one as is." And I'm like, it's not even halfway there yet. Like, I don't know what I'm doing with it, but it's not done. And then it's like, well, if you want to buy it, I guess it'll be done.
I guess I'll have to give it up then.
If you say it's done, it's
If
done.
you say it's done.
Oh gosh. Would you like to get into the artwork that
Sure,
you brought with
sure.
you today? Thank you so much for bringing your artwork into the studio too. It's lovely to look at it in person.
Yeah, I don't think the pictures always capture it.
I don't think so either. It's nice to have it to look at while we talk about it.
It's so hard to get a really great photo
It is.
of artwork,
Yeah.
especially paintings, because I feel like any type of painting that I've seen like in person versus just a picture of it, it's always way better
Of course.
in person. You can see all of the detail, you can see the true color. So it's really nice to have it in front of us. Yeah.
What did you say in the parking lot? You were like, oh, if the picture's better than your painting, then you're in trouble.
Yes. Exactly.
I saw that she had the painting and I was like, oh my God, thank you so much for bringing it. And she was like, yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's
Your
great.
picture that you take of your art should always be worse than what you're showing.
Lesson learned. Awesome. Well, Nina, do you want to go ahead and start with the painting?
Sure.
That's lovely. If you want to start with the title and materials and stuff and then your description.
Okay. So the first piece that we're going to talk about is called Upline, and it is acrylic on canvas. It was done in 2021, and the size is 12 inches by 36 inches. The painting is presented in a tall, slender portrait orientation on canvas. Its bright yet subtle tones of yellow, gold, bronze, and orange move fluidly from the upper left of the work across to the right and glides downwards on the canvas. Beautiful hues of red, pink, and magenta are softly blended into the background, primarily on the left side. Soft, translucent, fluffy white paint is delicately worked throughout the piece, which creates a sense of weightlessness. There is a column of curvaceous intertwined goddesses running down the piece just left of the center. The goddesses range from light pink fleshy tones to deep red. This adds a new dimension to the piece.
This is probably one of the newest pieces that I've done. The goddess figures have definitely transformed over the past couple years, and I've had them kind of side by side, not really interacting. And I think the past probably year, they've become more layered. I'm sure that says something very deep about me. I cannot tell you what that is.
Aren't you a counselor?
I'm sorry.
I really love how they are layered, because I have a few of your pieces and they're like the more of the decorative paper cutout.
Yes.
Which also is amazing.
Thank you.
And then I have one that it's like the burned wood.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and and that's part of what I do also, different mediums. So I've done more collage paint type things, which is what you have, and then some wood burning, and then into sculptural. And I'll go back and forth between all of them, sometimes work on them all at the same time.
The background of this piece is quite abstract, and the figures are also fairly abstract, but definitely like definitively a female figure. Why did you choose to kind of create that really stark differentiation between the background and like the focused figure of the painting?
Well, for me, the hardest part of creating is the beginning and the end. So if I do a background that doesn't require a lot of pressure or specificity, that really helps my process. So I can just, focus more on colors and how they're interacting. And then I can go back in with more detailed figurative things and figure out, what I like. But I guess I do it that way to put less pressure on myself. Because if you just have, I really don't know how artists who do, photorealism, how they even start or where they even start on a canvas. That is just very intimidating for me. Even if it's a tiny canvas, there's white. There's just so much white everywhere. So to start with something a little more abstract, more color focused is helpful for me.
And it looks like you produce a lot of different layers.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll keep going back in. And then sometimes, the figures need a little more definition or a little, to tone down some areas so that they stick out a little bit more. So I'll go back in a million times, really. I'll just keep going back in and adding tiny bits or, messing around with the metallics, the tones, the layers.
And when you, typically when you start a painting like this one, do you have an idea of where it's going, like where you want it to go, or do you just start? Like I'm the type of person that I usually kind of think of some colors that I want to work with, but then I just go for it. I don't necessarily have it planned out. Do you plan these?
No, I really wish I did. I think that would also help me a lot, but I cannot do that.
It's difficult.
Yeah. I have a general idea of what I'm doing, and I know when it feels right. I go more by feeling. I try not to have this is going to be this type of painting. I think it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But if I'm feeling that way, then I will work on a more, like a less abstract piece. So that's also why I do multiple pieces, so I can have different energy, express the different creative energy in different ways as I'm working. So it's really just me trying to put less pressure on myself. So to avoid a lot of those, this is terrible. If it's terrible, then I can just move on to another piece and just go back and forth.
This piece, and it seems like a lot of your work is very heavily focused on female form and the female body.
Yes.
But for this piece specifically, used a lot of pinks and reds and kind of warmer tone colors. And I know that's generally very associated with femininity, but you have a lot of other colors in here. What was kind of the inspiration behind using all of these colors?
Well, I wanted the background to stick out more, and I wanted to the figures are actually using the same base color, so the deeper red, and then just mixing it with whites. And because I did know, because I had to tape it off, I did know I was going to do a line of figures. I didn't know what that would look like, but so I used colors that would, complement the background, but also be able to stand out from the background.
Is there a specific type of technique? And Nina referenced it in her description as this white fluffy paint, and it's translucent and kind of weightless, but how do you do this?
A lot of water, and I love the fluid acrylics, my favorite. And you can really just layer them in a really delicate way. So it's water and messing around with water and dabbing some places, letting it dry, then, or letting it semi-dry and then removing some of it. So I try to get a lot of fussiness out on the back so that I can focus on the important, figurative part.
Yeah. It makes me think runny isn't quite the right word, but it is kind of very fluid, and creates a lot of movement, which I think definitely complements the figures in it as well.
Yeah, I've had people say so people don't always notice that they're women figures. I've heard them just because a lot of my pieces do have a similar figure, but sometimes it's, paper cutouts, but it's basically it's very similar. And I've had people say, oh, it looks like, butterflies or tools or seeds or fish. They see all different kinds of things. So a lot of my pieces do have that flowing movement to the figures.
There's so much movement in like their figure and their posture.
Yeah, I think and the straight line obviously helps with that too visually. Yeah. But yeah, I try to keep them the color is flat, but the movement, keeping the movement, keeping them being dynamic, keeping them interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that they're flat, that the color is flat, because everything else, there's so much dimension already. And then it feels like, to me anyway, when I look at it, it feels like not only is the background, the abstract background moving, so are these goddesses. They're just moving kind of in a different direction, but they're still flowing.
I definitely associate it with like the Greek muses kind of thing. I was actually thinking about Hercules, like the Disney Hercules movie, and just like the depiction of women that aren't necessarily always represented in media. And I think that this is like such a powerful depiction of like freedom with your body and just kind of the comfort level that comes with like being a curvaceous woman, or people don't like to say fat, but like a fat woman, and talking about like how that affects your body and like the way that you conduct yourself too. And I always associate it with like, I don't know, I always feel like maybe I like hunch over more, or I like sit like with my arms crossed or like my legs crossed or something. But this is like the exact opposite of that. There's like no shame. There's nothing like stationary about it. They're so free, and like there's no hesitancy in their movement. And I really appreciate that about this piece. Well, I'll jump over to your second piece that you brought, if that's okay.
Sure.
Unless there was anything else you'd like to say. So the second piece that you brought is a sculpture, which I might be putting my foot in my mouth with this, but I think might be the first sculpture in this style that we've had, because we've had a ceramicist on before, so that's kind of sculptural. But I was really excited to write a description for this, so thank you for bringing that in. The second piece today is, you wrote untitled and then in parentheses wooden goddess. It's basswood and oak, done in 2017, and it's 12.5 inches by 3.5 inches. This carved wooden sculpture is of a female body depicted from the mid-thigh up. Her head is bulbous and round. The wood is cut away to outline 2 breasts that droop slightly and rest on her stomach. Her arms tucked at her side, resting on her rounded thighs. It sits on an oak pedestal in the shape of a rectangular prism. So you know what's funny is when I was learning about the Venus of Willendorf in school, one of the things that I didn't notice until I saw it in person was it is extremely small.
Yes.
And that is exactly what happened with this piece when I saw you carrying it in. I was like, oh shit, this is small. And I was like, it tricked me again. And I love that. I love like the accessibility of it, and the like you really have to look at it, whereas if it were bigger, it might be too, I'm trying to think of like the right wording for this, like too obvious or something. So that was super fun and exciting, because I was like, that's exactly what happened with the other piece.
I feel like I had that experience too when I first saw these in person. I was like, they're so like nice and tiny. Like I was expecting them to be larger just from the pictures.
Actually, I think so. A couple things. I've worked super tiny. That's where my comfort level is. Like I have done sculptures that are, penny size. That is what I love to do. Like probably the size of her head, and that's my comfort zone. So this is like bigger for me. I think I just love doing the tiny detailed work, the folds, the creases, the texture, working tiny. The thing that's interesting is these pieces could probably translate bigger pretty easily. I've done bigger pieces of similar works just to see what would happen, and they do translate, but it does create a different meaning, like what you were saying. These, the subject can be shocking because I think that we have views of, larger people and larger women and being fat and what that means and taking up space. And, even the advertisements that we see of people aren't real. They're photoshopped, they're colored, the things are taken away, the body parts are stretched, the tones are changed, the eyeballs everything is changed. So when you see a piece of art of a subject that is typically taboo, it can be shocking. So having a smaller piece also really brings you in, gives you a comfort level with it, allows you space to be able to, breathe and take it in. Whereas a bigger piece, yes, it can be intimidating,
So with these pieces, Andi, does it start as one block? Because you have it like on a pedestal. So is that separate? Or is it just one piece and then you take away?
So this piece is two separate pieces just because, but sometimes I do carve the pedestal as part of it. I have an affinity, in case you couldn't tell, for this long rectangular shapes. And I also think because it's a goddess, I think it looks better raised on a pedestal. So sometimes the piece of wood that I use for the initial carving isn't big enough to have a pedestal for it. So sometimes I will, add a piece in. But the pedestal for me, while most people place a piece of art on a pedestal, for these goddesses, the pedestal is a part of the piece. So this one, yes, it can come apart, but it's meant to be presented. Like, this is an important piece of work. This is on a pedestal. This is how you view it.
I'm always curious about this with like people that carve stone or wood or marble. But do you find like a piece of wood and then decide what you're going to make out of it because of the way the wood looks? Or do you like know what you're going to make and then you find a piece of wood that fits it?
I have no idea what I'm going to make. And it sounds, I think, not to bring up Michelangelo, but I think he said like the piece reveals itself, and that is so true. And I'm sure I'm misquoting him. Sorry, Michelangelo.
I think he'll forgive you. Probably doesn't even know what a podcast
is. Yeah, the piece really reveals itself as you're working. You could have a hard spot in the stone or in the wood, and you have to change, you have to shift as you go. My favorite medium is sculpture and carving, so I feel a lot more comfort with that. I don't put expectations on myself. I don't have to do a pre-abstract layer. I can just, it just comes out. We work together to create the piece. The stone and the tools and I work together to create what it's going to be.
I like that. The way you worded that. That's really, it's like, like you and the tools work together.
Yeah.
I never looked at it that way.
Yeah, I always say, when I don't always teach art, but I have taught, classes. And the thing that I try to teach and impart on people is you have to be friends with your tools. Mm-hmm. You have to, get to know them. It's, you don't meet somebody always and you're really best friends with them. So it's important to get to know your tool and how it feels and how to use it and get to know them. And yes, you're not the best tool for this thing, but you're a really good tool for that. So you get to know them and, work with them. You have to work together. Hopefully they like you.
I like that.
Yeah. It's like some of my palette knives. Some of them, I don't get along with all of them.
Yeah. And sometimes, and I think when you learn a new skill or when you're being taught something, you fight against that. And you have to let your hands remember how to, call back to the ancient times and let your body remember how to do things. Like we humans have been doing all these things for, hundreds of thousands of years. We just have to let ourselves go. And when you connect to that spiritual place, amazing things happen.
Ancestral muscle memory.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
I really like that a lot.
So, Andi, what does your process entail and what inspires your work?
So usually I pick up a piece of wood and I just start roughing it out because there's generally areas that I know I won't need as I go. And then again, it's more of an intuitive process as I go. I don't have a plan. I don't pick up, the wood or anything, the stone or the tools. I don't really have a plan. I usually know I'm going to do something, feminine. I know I'm going to do figurative, and then I just go from there.
Do you ever do anything with basically the leftovers, like from carving, or if you're doing like your collage pieces and you're cutting out the goddesses? Do you ever do anything with said scraps?
Yes, so I am an art hoarder, and I have just jars of scrap paper. The bigger pieces of wood I'll save to carve for something or use as, it's not always usable depending on the tool that I'm using. Like hand tools leaves a lot of like tiny little pieces, so it's not really usable. When you use bigger tools, then you can have, a chunk and use that. If you have like a table saw, you can, have a chunk of wood to be able to use. But yeah, I've like jars of little scraps of thread that I have. I just think they're so pretty and I just love looking at them. So yeah, I collect them. I don't always use them, but I collect them.
Yeah, I used to collect like the little dried pieces of acrylic.
Yes.
That's on top of the caps.
Yes.
And I had them like all different colors, just sitting in a jar, and I'm like, why am I saving these? And this was a while ago, but I eventually was like, you know what, I'm gonna do a painting with this, and I did like an abstract tree, and then I put these little like acrylic lumps, if you will, like throughout the tree, and it actually looked really cool. And my friend actually asked for it. So she's had it for years, and she has it hanging in her office. But I was like, oh, like I saved all of that, had no idea what I was going to do with it, and somebody really loved it.
Yeah.
And I also still like just love like peeling that paint
There's
off.
nothing more satisfying.
It really is.
I made a piece with my acrylic. I had like little, the circles. So it was like this beautiful domed piece that you could peel out, and it was really ugly and horrible. And it's sitting behind almost everything in my studio because it was so bad. And no one wanted it or wanted to buy it. So I was unsuccessful. So I'm probably going to stick with jars.
Do you ever use oils?
I have not, but mostly because I get migraines and smells are a trigger for me. Mm-hmm. So I have not tried oils, although I think they're gorgeous and luscious and stunning, and the pieces that people can create with them are incredible. But I did see, probably on TikTok, that you can use like a different oil. Like you can even use olive oil. I just saw this. So I was thinking of starting, or there's like a lavender oil you can use too. So I was thinking of doing that. I would have no idea what I'm doing, but...
Well, you should probably ask Michelangelo, because I just saw him on TikTok the other day. He's got his own TikTok.
Where is this? I need it. I need to see it.
But on a serious note, have you looked into the water-soluble oils?
I have not. I haven't.
So I have been playing around with those, the Winsor & Newton, and it's definitely not the same feel as a true oil paint, but they still work very nicely if you want to like mess around with them. And I use them at home because I don't have proper ventilation, and they don't really smell. If I'm like using them for a long period of time, I'll just like have the fan on and maybe crack the window, but they really don't have much of an odor. And they don't dry. Well, they don't take as long to dry. They still take a long time to dry, but not as long.
That's what I was
And
gonna ask.
they're more affordable too, which is nice.
Always nice.
Yes.
But if you're interested, because you don't need like a solvent. You can use the thinner, but you can just use soap and water to clean them.
Wow.
Which is really nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to hear about your little paint scrapings from both of you because I love oil paints and I put like my, I love oil paints and my palette is like a glass cutting board. And when it dries, I love scraping it off with like a big like box cutter blade. Yes. And I just like keep them in a jar. And I was like, this is so weird. Like it looks disgusting. But I was so excited when you guys were like, yeah, I kept them. I'm like, now I want to go home and like make something out of it. I'm so excited.
This is why artists should be friends with other artists so that they can validate all their weirdness and things that they do.
Yeah, we can all just have show and tell.
Yes.
And bring in our carvings and like wood chips in mason jars.
Yes. Cicada shells. Jar of cicada shells.
I have plenty of those in my yard.
Yep. I have those too.
A jar?
Yes, of cicada.
I don't have a
jar of teeth, anyone? No teeth?
No teeth.
All right. I won't say who has that in this room. But it's
like
me.
Your own teeth?
No.
Or other teeth?
No, it's actually teeth that you use for dental. They're fake, but you use them for dental. They're real dental mold teeth, and I have a whole jar of them.
I had for a really long time. That's
it's a lot to deal with. I'm sorry, I had to share that with you.
It's okay.
Now you have to have that in your head.
When she's like, "Oh, your own teeth," and you're like, "No," and I was like, "Whose teeth are they?"
Should I be asking this question?
Well, now I'm glad that they're like molds. Not
if someone gave me their teeth, I would definitely take them.
I should have saved my dog's teeth for you when she lost them all last summer. I'd find them in my shoes. Oh. I'd stick my shoes on and there's a dog tooth.
She's trying to give you a gift.
Clearly.
It's like reverse tooth fairy.
She thought if I found a tooth in my shoe, I'd give her a treat.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom.
Well, speaking of your studio and all of the things you keep in there, you mentioned that you have a studio space that's adjacent to two other artists, or you share it with them?
Yeah, we share a space. We have working studio space, and then we have a gallery area, and that's with Anna Hamilton and Femi Johnson, and they're both amazing artists. And I've really it can be intimidating being with other artists, but also I found it to be really helpful for my process and very validating and reassuring, and keep me working, because that is hard to do. It's hard to keep going. It's hard not to be defeated. But when you're with other people who are also creating, it can be very inspirational and motivating.
I always enjoyed that when I had shared studio space. It's nice. I mean, like working from home, I'm like, okay, this is great because I don't have to wear pants if I don't want to.
Yes.
Like, yeah, this is great. But at the same time, you're like, it'd be nice to have somebody's opinion on this. And like, I asked my husband, and he's like, well, you're the artist, not me. I'm like, yeah, but it would be nice to have some feedback once in a while.
Could we do a critique?
He's like, well, I'm a musician. I'm like, well, so that's always the conversation. Well, I don't ask you about my drumming. I'm like, because it sounds good no matter what. No. But yes, it is that community aspect is really nice to have.
Can you give us like a verbal walkthrough of your studio? You mentioned teeth. You mentioned lint. What else you got in there?
I don't keep too scary of things in there. But I do have an inspiration wall that is some creepy things. There's butterflies, and there's paintings, and there's masks. It's just a wall for me to look at and be, inspired by. It's things that I like. So,
I haven't heard of that before. I really like that. That's very cool.
I might have to do something like that for myself.
Yeah, it helps. Mm-hmm. Little figurines and little, the beautiful hand-painted Mexican like the little animals that are just beautiful and so interesting.
Yeah. That's very neat.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I have that like in my sketchbook. Like I cut out stuff and then just like stick it in there, and I like categorize it by shape. So I have like page of circles, page of squares, page of triangles. But like
nice.
I like that idea. I need to find wall space to do that because that's really cool.
I have folders, like just file folders with just pages ripped out of magazines and stuff of like designs that I like.
Oh.
Thinking that, one day I'll use it for a collage.
Yes.
But it's always like, I like this design too much to just look at it. I don't want to glue it to anything or put anything over it. So maybe I just need to put those on a board or a wall.
Yeah. I've done that. And I've ended up with binders and binders of stuff. Here's a rabbit. Here's this gorgeous color orange. Here is like this room. Here is this piece of art.
Oh, yeah. I have like paint swatches out the butt, just like I'm like, this color is amazing.
Yeah, stacks. Just stacks.
It's like, oh, are you painting your house? Nope, just looking at the colors.
Ma'am, why are you picking orange, purple, and green? I think you are using these for art purposes and not for paint swatches.
You don't know me.
I'm so scared I'll be caught sometimes.
I know, like, can I help you?
Looking around.
No, just taking all of these.
I'm painting a wall. Thank you.
I'm painting 37 different rooms.
I have a very big house.
I have a really, really large house.
Well, I'm glad that's a universal experience too.
Well, they're so pretty. Why did they have to make them so pretty? Just looking at me with all their colors and one wonderful like organization.
Yeah.
So how long have you been at the studio that you're out at now?
So again, I'm really bad with years.
That's okay.
But probably I think it's like 8 now.
Okay.
It's a while. It's been a long time.
Nice. Did you have a studio space before that? Or?
No, and I think that's also what led to me working very tiny. I would sit on the floor of my bedroom and just work very, in very tiny, smaller pieces, So having a studio has caused me to be able to create bigger pieces of work and think about creating even bigger pieces of work. I have bigger pieces sitting outside ready to be cut. Because I do need to expand. I think it's important to be able to do all different sizes. So that is something that will happen in the next year. Just working bigger and getting bigger pieces.
Awesome. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too. So you said you've been at your studio for maybe about 8 years. Have you always lived in the Lehigh Valley?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was born and raised in Allentown.
Nice.
And just never left.
Woohoo. Same.
Yeah, this area has a tendency to kind of suck you in and hold on to you. Even statistically, like people from this area tend to like stay here. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a vortex.
And I know a lot of people that leave for a while and they come back.
Yes.
Like because they want to come back.
Yeah.
I just want to,
Just to clarify.
Not because they were like ripped out of their homes and
Well, some
dragged
people
here.
come back because it's like they have to for a job or family or
Sure.
something. But a lot of people do come back because they want to. I think that's important.
Well, I mean, we are close to Philly. We're close to New York. We're close to, transportation hubs. I mean, there's a lot of things coming in and out of the Lehigh Valley all the time. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
What about specifically for you? Like, what is it about living here and working here and operating as an artist here that really appeals to you?
I don't know if it appeals to me necessarily. I just think that this is home. I've definitely thought about, moving, to a different climate, especially the winter weather. But this works for me right now, and it's it's what I'm comfortable. I mean, it's comfort. I'm used to being here. I know what's happening here. Moving is very intimidating, especially if you're moving out of state or somewhere completely different. And again, as an artist, like that, we do have access to larger art centers, so it's also convenient.
Yeah, a lot of people don't have the luxury of being like, oh, I'm just going to get on the bus and drive hour and a half to 2 hours to New York. Or hop on the train and go down to Philly, which is like pre-COVID, I did that sometimes.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say frequently. I wish I did it more, but it was nice to have access to that.
Andi, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to see your work, what's the best place to do that?
So we have an upcoming show. The dates are going to be announced, but you can find that on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, working on my website.
Very good. And what's the name of your studio that the show will be at?
It's Expression Studio on Hamilton.
Awesome.
In downtown Allentown.
Very cool. We'll make sure to share that through the podcast account, so make sure you're following us on Instagram and Facebook to get all that information. And then your Instagram is at Andi Grunberg, ANDIGRUNBERG.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
It was very enlightening.
Yes.
And exciting.
Thank you.
Yes. And again, thank you so much for bringing in your work for us to look at. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that and how much I enjoyed it.
Thanks for looking at them.
I'm always inspired by you.
Thank you.
I really am.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so excited that we could do this.
Me too. Thank you so much, Nina and Andi, for joining us in the studio today for today's episode. Our opportunity of the week is our upcoming art exhibition opening at the gallery at Still Pixel Studios with featured artist Nina Boodhansingh, November 17th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at Still Pixel Studios at 701 North New Street, located in historic Bethlehem. We hope to see you there.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast, a Still Pixel original series. Don't forget to like the podcast, leave us a review, and follow us on both social media and streaming services at Lehigh Valley Arts Podcast.